This is the city of Xi'an in China at night. On May 18th and 19th, 2023, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, hosted a high-profile Central Asian summit. Party leader Xi Jinping and his wife Premier Li Qiang welcomed visiting Central Asian leaders with a ceremony in the city of Xi'an, followed by a banquet and a cultural performance gala. The newsreel broadcast on Chinese state television was accompanied by historical-style music. Xi'an was the capital city of the Tang Dynasty, known as Chang'an. The Tang Dynasty ruled China from year 618 to 907. It was one of the longest unified and most powerful dynasties in Chinese history. At the summit, the elements of the Tang Dynasty were evident everywhere, from the flags and palace lanterns, the palace maids who guided the heads of state, to the cultural performances on the red carpet in the garden. The Chinese official media naturally praised this idea highly, saying that the open, inclusive, mutually respectful, equal, and mutually beneficial way of interaction among the six countries has continued from the ancient Silk Road to today's One Belt One Road, showing strong vitality as well as its inspirational power. But the impression we got was that the CCP adopted the bloody red color as usual, the favorite color of this red party, as the background of all the arrangements. Although the flag of the Great Tang was erected on the site, it lacked the elegance of the Great Tang. Instead, it looked odd. When the heads of the five countries entered one after another, there were ladies in ancient costumes holding lanterns to lead the way. But the posture and demeanor of these women were of seductive beauty, inappropriate for such a solemn occasion, and definitely not in line with the Tang Dynasty style. People who aren't familiar with ancient Chinese culture may find it a bit exotic. For many Chinese audiences, it may remind them of the ancient scenes of the red light district. In recent years, historical dramas have become popular in China, and some of the decorations on the Central Asia Summit are somewhat similar to the red light district portrayed in those television dramas where officials were entertained. If you don't believe it, you can check out those historical dramas with such scenes. Perhaps the CCP officials who frequent the so-called exclusive VIP clubs are well versed in this, because that is the style of the sophisticated and elite clubs. They feel great about it, but when the heads of the five Central Asian countries came with their wives, such a mode of hospitality by the CCP seemed low class and out of line. It seemed like a time travel drama playing with Xi Jinping, the heads of state, and staff all dressed in modern suits, at odds with the imitation of the ancient ceremony. More bizarrely, most of them were wearing white masks. We saw the Xi Jinping couple in the center, standing with 7 other couples of state heads in front of the steps of an ancient high-rise building, watching the retro show together. It looked like a deliberate imitation of the Tang Emperor receiving a pilgrimage from foreign envoys. In addition, Xi Jinping attended a meeting with the presidents of the 5 Central Asian countries sitting at equal distances from each other at a huge round table. The atmosphere was solemn and mysterious as the ancient emperor received the state guests on pilgrimage.
中国唐代诗人李白曾有过长安赋写手
The Tang Dynasty poet Li Bai once wrote, "In Chang'an we meet again, worthy of more than 1,000 pieces of gold." Our gathering in Xi'an today to renew our millennia-old friendship and open up new vistas for the future is of very important significance.
具有十分重要的意义。2013年，我担任中国国家主席后，首次出访中亚。
Back in 2013, I put forward the initiative of jointly building a Silk Road economic belt during my first visit to Central Asia as Chinese chairman. Over the past decade, China and Central Asian countries have worked closely together to fully revive the Silk Road and actively deepen future-oriented cooperation, steering our relations into a new era.
将双方关系带入一个崭新时代。
In 2013, Xi Jinping chose Kazakhstan as the venue for his speech, where he outlined the vision of the Belt and Road Initiative, a US $1 trillion plan to build infrastructure projects in developing countries to bring them under China's sphere of influence. Unfortunately, this relationship hasn't been smooth sailing. Several Belt and Road projects in the region have stalled or become embroiled in scandals. Many Chinese analysts say the Belt and Road is a big money-spreading project. But Xi Jinping doesn't think so. He probably thinks it's not enough. Now that the 3-year zero COVID is over, Xi Jinping is going to take action, providing financial support of 26 billion RMB to Central Asian countries. Yes, you heard it right, 26 billion yuan. That is more than 3.7 billion US dollars.
为助力中国同中亚国家合作和中亚国家自身发展，中方将向中亚国家提供总额260亿元人民币的融资支持和无偿援助。
That is, China will provide financial support and non-repayable assistance to Central Asian countries totaling more than 3.7 billion to boost China's cooperation with Central Asian countries and their own development. However, the Chinese official media deliberately omitted this very important information when reporting on Xi's speech. But the Russian news agency picked it out and reported 26 billion yuan in the headline. Soon, the news was widely circulated in the mainland Chinese social media. This caused agitation among young people in China. The Hong Kong media, The Chaser, reported that some people considered 26 billion as lost again. Can you help me? I've been unemployed for half a year and I can't even afford food. Some commented, this is really generous with people's money. 26 billion yuan is given away with a wave of the hand. And some wrote, I want to immigrate to Central Asia because they have a strong country behind them. The CCP has a long history of throwing money around overseas. It began in the days of the first party leader, Mao Zedong. Since then, individual party leaders have continued in the presumed style of making frequent trips to countries around the world. The trips would usually include foreign aid in the form of free assistance, the forgiveness of past debts, the forgiveness of interest on past debts, free training of college students for other countries, free infrastructure construction for other countries, interest-free loans, etc. According to China's official media, the Global Times, on August 7, 2017, China's foreign aid from 2013 to August 2017 included loans of US $877.4 billion. Now, the reason why the CCP's official media didn't mention 26 billion yuan is because they are afraid of provoking greater national anger. Since the 3-year outbreak, China's economy has weakened, foreign investment has withdrawn significantly, private companies have closed down in large numbers, unemployment has skyrocketed, people's incomes have fallen, and the consumer index has fallen to new lows. According to official data released by the Chinese government in May, the Consumer Price Index (CPI) increased by 0.1% year-over-year in April this year, a record low since February 2021. In addition, deflation in the Producer Price Index (PPI) increased. This indicates that the communist authorities have still not found a remedy for the economic recovery. So, why does the Russian news agency want the world, especially the Chinese, to know that the CCP is throwing money around? This might be due to the fact that Xi Jinping seems to be eating Putin's cake. Central Asia refers to the 5 former Soviet republics, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. It includes a vast area stretching from the Caspian Sea in the west to Xinjiang, China in the east, Afghanistan in the south, and Russia in the north. For historical reasons, Russia has always viewed Central Asia as its traditional sphere of influence as well as a barrier and strategic buffer zone for its southern border security. The heads of Central Asian countries were also present at Moscow's Red Square on May 9, 2023, when a military parade was held at the invitation of the Kremlin. Because of the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war and Western sanctions against Russia, the financial markets of Central Asian countries are in violent turmoil, and currencies are severely devalued. Supply chains, industrial chains, and logistics chains in Central Asia need to be reconstructed, and interest rate hikes by the US and European central banks have intensified the flee of capital from Central Asia. As a result, these countries are facing serious economic problems. Out of their own interest, the Central Asian countries have chosen to remain neutral on the Ukraine issue. The US and Europe have taken the opportunity to strengthen economic and political relations with the 5 Central Asian countries and provide free aid. In order to preserve the traditional spheres of influence, in March 2023, Russia promoted the adoption of 34 measures in the Eurasian Economic Union to ensure trade between member states, making it clear to Central Asian countries that it won't tolerate any kind of de-Russianization in the countries of Russian spheres of influence. In terms of the security of the Central Asian countries, thanks to the Collective Security Treaty, they can either rely on Russia, although the Russo-Ukrainian War has shown the unreliability of the Russian military, or rely on the West in the future, which is the only 2 options. The Treaty of Collective Security is an intergovernmental military alliance signed by Russia and nearly 10 Central Asian countries in 1992. This choice will have to wait until the Russian-Ukrainian War is finally over. If Ukraine wins, Central Asia should opt for Western protection. If Russia wins, Central Asia may have other options. The CCP is taking advantage of Russia's weakness to initiate the Central Asia Summit, obviously digging into Russia's corner. These countries are China's close neighbors. If China were to tilt its energy purchasing power and investment efforts towards these countries would obviously benefit. At a time when Russia is actively guarding against the arrival of US and European forces in Central Asia, Beijing has given Russian President Vladimir Putin a gentle stab. Putin is most likely not happy about it. The CCP eyes the mineral resources in Central Asian countries and also likes to infiltrate them politically. China has invested billions of dollars in developing Central Asian natural gas, and railroads connecting China and Europe crisscross the region. The Chang'an China-Europe freight trains carry more and more goods made in China to Central Asia, including construction machinery and daily necessities in the early stage to the current high value-added products such as automobiles, spare parts, and consumer electronics. Before the launch of the China-Europe freight trains, some of the Kazakh grain and oil products imported by our company had to be transported by the Trans-Siberian Railway, then by sea, and then by railway again. It took nearly 2 months for the goods to reach Xi'an. Now, the China-Europe freight train is very fast and convenient. The goods can be loaded from Kazakhstan and directly transported to Xi'an port in less than 10 days. According to public data in China, its total trade with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan reached a record US $70 billion in 2022 and increased by 22% in the first quarter of 2023 compared to the same period in 2022. The CCP needs continued access to Central Asia's resources to ensure the smooth and safe flow of China-EU trains. Central Asian countries have a pragmatic need to interact with China, as they have no other choice. The Central Asian countries are culturally closer to Russia, and there are no major barriers to language communication. Russia may be hurting, but the population base is still there, and it's still the main market for Central Asian countries. On the other hand, it isn't so easy for Central Asian countries to enter the Chinese market. The Central Asian countries won't give up their ties with Russia and have been actively strengthening cooperation with the US and Western countries, so they won't easily turn to the CCP. Central Asian countries need foreign investments to develop their economies. The trip to the Central Asian Summit is not something they would refuse, as they just needed to go along with the political show of the Communist Party leader. The Central Asian Summit was held at almost the same time as the Western G7 Summit in Hiroshima, Japan. This G7 Summit specially invited 8 countries including India, Indonesia, Australia, South Korea, the Pacific Island nation of Cook Islands, the African island nation of Comoros, Brazil, and Vietnam. These countries all share complicated political and economic ties with China and Russia. On May 20th, the G7 leaders issued the G7 Summit Joint Communiqué. In response to the issue of how to deal with the CCP, the G7 sent a message of unity in 9 areas, including resisting economic coercion, de-risking the Chinese economy, the Taiwan Strait issue, and the South China Sea issue. The G7 communiqué sparked discontent from the CCP. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said on the same day that China strongly opposed the joint statement issued by the G7 in Hiroshima and had lodged serious complaints with the summit organizer, Japan. The Foreign Ministry statement said the G7 disregarded China's concerns and attacked China and interfered in its internal affairs, including that of Taiwan. The Central Asia Summit is hardly a challenge to the G7 summit, be its political influence or economic power. The Central Asian countries are just not on the same level compared to the G7 countries. The CCP is only dragging in its circle of friends to show that it isn't alone, but this alliance can't possibly reach a union of both shared values and business interests like that of democratic countries. This is despite the fact that Xi said in his welcome speech that Shanxi, the eastern starting point of the ancient Silk Road, has witnessed more than 2,000 years of profound friendship between China and the Central Asian countries. At the same time, he added that China and the Central Asian countries have gone through an extraordinary journey since the establishment of diplomatic relations.
中国同中亚国家关系有着深厚的历史渊源。
The China-Central Asia relationship is steeped in history, driven by broad actual needs and built on solid popular support. Our relations are brimming with vigor and vitality in the new era. In fact, China and Central Asia have long been in various wars, large and small, and don't have much deep friendship to speak of. After the Central Asian countries became independent from the former Soviet Union, countries bordering China also had territorial disputes. Adopting the same model used in setting borders with Russia, the CCP eventually gave away varying sizes of land to settle the border. China has only had diplomatic relations with 5 Central Asian countries for 31 years after the collapse of the former Soviet Union when they became independent. Now, the CCP hosted the Central Asia Summit in such a high profile which showed its worries. The Red Party's main worry is that Central Asia might turn to the US, which would create a bigger encirclement around the CCP. And it wants to take advantage of Russia's decline as well, as it's supposedly planning to take over Russia's former sphere of influence. This is most likely the CCP's wishful thinking. Japan, where the G7 summit was held, is arguably the East Asian country that has preserved the most Tang Dynasty culture. During the Tang Dynasty, Japan sent 18 teams of Tang envoys to bring home what they had learned about the politics, economy, culture, and all aspects of the life of the Tang Dynasty. It had a profound impact on Japanese society and laid the groundwork for Japan to preserve most of the Tang culture to this day. It should be said that to a certain extent, Japan has preserved the culture of the Tang Dynasty even better. As for the Central Asia Summit, the CCP didn't choose to hold it in Beijing, but in Xi'an, precisely because it wanted to portray the atmosphere of the Tang Dynasty 1,000 years ago. Unfortunately, those immersed in the party culture probably only knew about the superficial prosperity of the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty was known far and wide in the world. Many nations came to pay homage to it, including many states in East Asia at the time. Why? Chinese culture is said to be a culture inspired by the divine. There was a consensus throughout the imperial court that when heaven and mankind were united, the world was able to flourish and prosper as it conformed to the heavenly order. Even the emperor in this regard was a follower of heaven, and thus the emperor was called the Son of Heaven. The Son of Heaven represented the will of heaven to rule the people. When the Son of Heaven acted in accordance with the way of heaven, he would be supported by the people and the country would be strong. When the Son of Heaven deviated from the way of heaven, someone would come to oppose and replace him. It was precisely this way of rule that made China once lead the civilization of the world and used to have all the nations coming to it. The present Okinawa of Japan is the former Ryukyu, which was once a vassal state of China. A multitude of small neighboring states like Vietnam, Korea, etc. were once vassal states of China. The CCP leader Xi Jinping seems to have a dream of becoming an emperor deep in his heart, but the CCP is atheistic and has tragically and almost completely destroyed the glorious civilization of this ancient country of China. It has become more and more isolated internationally and now has to rely on throwing big money to create a false prosperity of all nations coming to China. This time, it was a bit surprising that Chinese Premier Li Qiang was not called to Xi'an. On May 17th, Li Qiang met with Tajikistan's president in Beijing, and on May 19th, he met with Kyrgyzstan's president in Beijing. This shows that the Central Asia Summit could have been held in Beijing, but the Communist Party's top leadership preferred it in Xi'an, and various participants had to go back and forth between Beijing and Xi'an. It's also possible that the State Council of China is an institution that serves the CCP and not an independent government department. So the representative of the government department, the Chinese premier, doesn't need to be part of the royal family. Letting the party leader enjoy it alone is more in line with the CCP's understanding of the emperors in history. The question is, can dipping into the ancient empire help change the rapid decline of the Red Dynasty?